Hi and welcome back. Let's look at some logical functions in DAX. Logical functions help you perform logical operations and return Boolean values, true or false, right? And some common logical functions in DAX are the if function, the switch function, the and or the or, the if error is blank, is error, etc. Now, let's start with the if function. And basically, the if function, just similar to your Microsoft Excel, evaluates a condition and returns one value if the condition is true and another value if the condition is false. Basically, you're asking Power BI to look at a condition and tell if that condition is being met or if that condition is not being met. So let's try out the if function. Right. So let's go to, I'm going to delete the time intelligence data. We don't need that anymore. Yeah, this is going to pop an error. So we're going to delete that too. The total quantity revenue metric is also going to show an error because it was based on time intelligence tables. So we delete that too. So let's create a calculated column, shall we? And let's go to our table view. Just one moment. Let's go to our table view and let's go to our sales table. Now, how do we use the if function? Like I said, if function basically evaluates a condition and tells and returns whether that condition is being met, true, or not being met, false. So let's create a new column. And what we want to do is this. We want to use the revenue field, and we want to say if the revenue is greater than 50, we want to say high revenue. Otherwise, we want to say low revenue. So basically, we have a condition. The condition is, does the revenue equal 50, or is the revenue greater than 50 rather? If it is greater than 50, then we want to say high revenue. If it's lesser than 50, we want to say low. Lesser than or equal to 50, we want to say low revenue. So let's do that. Let's create a new column. I'm going to delete this current day number. I don't think we need it anymore. So just to keep our data tidy. Okay, let's also remove current. We'd also remove current time. Okay, so we're going to write our DAX now. So new column. And let's call it revenue. Let's call that column revenue class. Let's call it revenue class. So say revenue class equals. Now we're going to use the if function. So we say if, right? And what we have to specify first of all is our logical test. We want to say if our revenue, remember our revenue is greater than 50, then we want to, next we have to specify the result if true. So we want to say high if it's greater than 50, high revenue. Otherwise, we want to say low revenue. And then we press enter. And there we have our column here, high revenue and low revenue. depending on whether the revenue is greater than 50 or not. Now that's the if function, plain and simple, similar to what you have in Microsoft Excel, yes? Now let's also look at the switch function. So the switch function is a bit like a decision maker and is somewhat similar to your case function in SQL or your nested if in Microsoft Excel. Now, what the switch function does is basically it goes row by row and sees if a certain condition is true, and if that condition is true, it returns a certain value. So basically, it allows you to check different possibilities, and based on what is true, it returns the answer you want. Right. So that's basically what the switch function does. So let's see how the switch function works. Basically, it takes in an expression, right? And this is basically what you want to evaluate or what you want to check or test. And then it takes in a value and a result pair. Basically, what it's saying is, let's go to our whiteboard. What the switch function is saying is this. I want to check a certain row or a certain column. So it goes column by column and then it performs a check test. If that test is true, it gives you an output. If the second condition is met, it gives you another output. So it's like you classifying, just like the case function does in SQL, where you say case, a condition, and then an output, case, another condition, and an output. So let's do a little bit of work with the switch function. Basically, what we want to do now is we want to classify revenue again. Well, let's classify quantity sold. And we want to say if the quantity is greater than 20, let's classify it as high. If it is greater than 10, let's call it moderate, and if it is not, let's call it low. So we create a new column. And we call it a quantity class. And would say I'm going to hold shift and enter because I want to go to a new line, and I'm going to just do tab just so it's well formatted. You can actually put everything in one line, doesn't really matter. So I'm going to say switch, and then let's close this bracket first, and then I'm going to create a new line in between both brackets. First, I want to enter my expression, and basically the first thing we have to enter is the value you want to test. So I'm going to enter true. And why am I entering true? Because I want to go row by row, and where there is a value, true is what's going to be returned where there is a value in each row. So I'm going to say true, and then next I want to enter is I want to enter my my value and then my result. So what I'm saying now is I'm going to go shift and enter. If the revenue is greater than I must have hit enter by mistake. If the revenue is greater than 20, I want to return high. Comma, shift and enter. If revenue is greater than 10, I want to return moderate, else I want to return low. And if we hit enter here, we have that classification there based on the options we've entered in our switch function. Now let's do this with another table just to play around a little bit. Let's go to products table. Let's do a very small table. Let's do the age group table. And so let's create a new column in the age group table. So here we want to assign things. So say I want to say if for adults I want to assign, maybe let's create a scenario where we are assigning certain monetary values to people based on their age group. So for adults I want to assign say $8,000. For seniors I want to assign 8,005. For young adults maybe 800, and for youth maybe 600. So let's do something with the switch function. Let's call it assigned funds or something, and then it's going to be, we're going to use the switch function. I'm going to shift and enter tab. I'm say switch, and then let's close this bracket, shift and enter, and I want to use the age group key. So basically I want to say age group key, I want to evaluate the age group key, comma, and for each age group key I'm going to say when it is 1, 1 is for adults, and I said $1,000. So when it is 2, that's for seniors, I said 1,005. When it is young adults, I said 800. Else 500. I mean, else that's because youth is just the only one left, 500. And let's see if this works. So we have that assigned. So basically we're evaluating the age group key column, and we're using that to categorize, or we're assigning based on what is in the age group key column. And that's basically the switch function. Now we're going to look at another function, and we'll be looking at the AND function in DAX. And basically the AND function, basically similar to the AND function you've been doing in Excel, SQL, returns true if two arguments. So if both arguments, comparing two arguments, and if both arguments are met, it returns true. If both arguments are not met, it returns false. So let's test it out. Let's go back to our sales table, and I want to check which of our transactions are greater than 50. Let's see. Let's use that. Let's use another example. Okay, you know what? Let's say greater than 50 and the price is less than $5. So there are two conditions. One, the revenue must be greater than 50, and price must be less than $5. Now, what the AND function does is that it takes these two conditions and checks where both of them are met. Where both are met. If both are met, it returns true. If Anything less than both of them being met, it returns false. So it's like your truth table, and I don't know if you're familiar with truth table. Basically, the truth table is this. Let's bring up the truth table. Bring it up from mathematics. So for and, we have condition 1, condition 2, and then outputs. So let's call it condition 1, con 1, condition 2, and then outputs. This is for and. For and, if condition 1 is true and condition 2 is true, the output is true. That's scenario 1. If condition 1 is, let's cancel. If condition 1 is true and condition 2 is false, then it is false, because both conditions have to be true for it to be true. If condition 1 is false and condition 2 is true, then it is false. If both conditions are false, then it is false. So the only condition where, or the only scenario where the output will be true is when both conditions are met. So in this our little example here, for using the AND function, we use it to check if to return true if both conditions are met. So let's test out the AND function. We want to say we want to check if the revenue is greater than 50 and if price is less than 5. So let's do new column. And let's just call it test and say equals to and we want to first check if price is less than 5 and revenue is greater than 50, and we can check that. So you can see in the first case it's flagged as true because revenue is greater than 55 and price is less than 5, 1.99. The third case, it's flagged as false because even though revenue is less than 5, even though price is less than 5, revenue is less than 50, not greater than 50, so it has to be false. So that's the AND function, right? We can even use it together with the if function, right? And say, well, you know, let's just stop there. Let's talk about the OR function. OR is similar to and basically it returns true if at least one of the arguments is true. So let's go back to our truth tables. For the OR function, just one has to be met for the output to be true. So if we say OR, let's not waste time. Let's change this to OR. So for OR, if condition 1 is true, condition 2 is true, then the output is true. If condition 1 is true and condition 2 is false, the output is still true because we just need one of the conditions to be true for the output to be true. If condition 1 is false, condition 2 is true, the output is still true. And if both are false, then the output is false. So basically, I can use this to check if at least one of the conditions is true. So if I say we're looking for where the revenue is greater than 50 or we sold more than 30, meaning quantity sold is more than 30. So we're saying where quantity sold, we're going to adjust this. Let's change it to or. say where quantity sold is greater than 20, or revenue is greater than 50. So one of these has to be met, and if we change this, you will see almost everything will have a lot of true, actually, not almost everything. But quantity sold, as long as either quantity sold is more than 20 or revenue is greater than 50, the value will be marked as true. And um, that's the and the or function in DAX. There's also the if error, and you're familiar with this from Microsoft Excel, so I'm not going to dwell on this too much. But the if error basically returns a value if there is an error. Otherwise, it returns the result of the value. And the syntax is similar to what you have in Excel. It's if error, then your value if there's an error. So, and that's basically used when you want to sort of error proof your work, just so it doesn't give you an error and it gives you something else instead. Now let's look at some another function. Let's look at the in function. Basically, what the in function does is that it checks if a value exists, just like SQL, in a list of values. So what we can do is this. We're still going to call this measure test. We're going to use the in function. And we want to check if we want to say if want to check if the quantity class is high or moderate, and we want it to return true. So basically, we are telling Power BI check the quantity class column. If it contains high or it contains moderate, then return true. If not, return false. So we say in, we use the list, the curly braces. Actually, I think we have to use this we have to actually use this in conjunction with an if function. So basically, we are saying if something is in a list, then return a value. So we have to use this in conjunction with an if function. We can't use it outside an if function. So if we say if, remember we talked about the if function, and we say if quantity class in, we have to now specify what are those values we want to compare quantity class with. High, low. So if the quantity class is either high or low, then we want you to return yes. If not, we want you to return no. And if we click on enter, we would see that everywhere the quantity class is either high or low, we have a yes, but where we have moderate, we have a no. So the in operator just basically checks if a value is contained in a list of values. So what Power BI does when you enter this script is that it goes row by row and checks the quantity class. High, is it in this guy over here? If it is, then it returns yes. If it is not, then it returns no. So that's the in operator in Power BI. So we've been able to look at some logical operators in Power BI, and in the next video we're going to be looking at some filter functions in Power BI. So stay tuned and see you in the next video.